My husband walked out of a 27-year marriage for a younger woman, convinced he was upgrading his life. What he didn't know was that the very day he left me, I became the sole owner of a multi-billion-dollar empire. And by the time he found out, it was already too late, because a week before everything changed, I was still living a life he believed was small. I became a billionaire 3 days after my husband walked out on a 27-year marriage. Not months later, not years later, 3 days. He thought he was upgrading his life. He thought I had nothing left to offer. What he didn't know was that the moment he left, everything had already changed. Welcome to Untold Journey Stories. If you believe some truths don't need revenge, they just need time, take a second to subscribe. It helps this channel keep telling stories that stay with you. A week before that, my life was small, quiet, predictable. My biggest decision was whether to add another art class at the community centre. That was my world. Paint on my hands, children laughing, simple routines that didn't ask for recognition. There was a rhythm to it, a life that didn't compete, didn't prove, just existed. And then everything shifted. I was sitting in a glass office, across from a man in a tailored suit, listening to words that didn't belong to me. Asset transfers, control, activation. "You don't need to rush," he said. His voice was calm, almost reassuring. Andrew Calloway. Next to him sat Marcus Hale, a financial director from a company I had barely heard of until now. "Your father planned this carefully," Andrew continued. "He expected hesitation." Of course he did. I sat there, hands still, trying to keep up with a reality that felt misplaced. Because just days earlier, I was standing in my kitchen listening to my husband explain why he was leaving. Daniel Whitmore, 27 years, reduced to a conversation that lasted less than 10 minutes. "I want more," he said. "More ambition, more excitement, more than this, more than me." And I remember not arguing, not begging, just listening. Because something in his voice told me he had already left. Long before he said the words. And maybe that was the moment everything began. Not when he walked out, but when I realised I wasn't going to follow. And that quiet decision not to follow him was the first step into a reality I didn't yet understand. The days after the divorce didn't feel dramatic. There was no collapse, no visible breaking point, just space. A kind of silence that settles in slowly when something long familiar is suddenly gone. The house felt different, not emptier, just quieter in a way that made every small sound feel louder than it should. Half the closet was gone, a few shelves cleared. 27 years, reduced to gaps where things used to be. I walked through each room without rushing, not searching for anything, just noticing what remained. It was strange how little I needed to take with me. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from an old friend with a link attached. I hesitated, then opened it. A photo. Daniel, sitting across from a young woman on a rooftop restaurant, the ocean stretching behind them. She was smiling, bright, effortless, holding a glass of champagne like the moment belonged to her. Him, relaxed, certain. The caption was simple, new beginnings. I stared at it longer than I expected. A week ago, that image might have shattered something inside me, but now it felt distant, almost irrelevant, because for the first time I could see it clearly. He hadn't just left me. He had walked towards something he believed was better, something more exciting, more impressive. And maybe that was the difference between us. He was chasing a life that looked bigger. While I was beginning to understand, mine had never been small, not in the ways that actually mattered. I set the phone down and let the silence return, because somewhere beneath the quiet, something else was starting to take shape. Not anger, not regret, something steadier, something that didn't need to be proven. And for the first time since he left, I realised I wasn't waiting for him to understand what he lost. I was waiting for the truth to reveal itself. And that was the moment everything I thought I understood about control quietly began to unravel. The headlines didn't just spread, they exploded. Within hours, my name was everywhere. Financial sites, business blogs, even lifestyle pages that usually talked about celebrity scandals were suddenly dissecting my life like it was public property. The phrase they kept repeating felt almost surreal every time I saw it. Overnight billionaire. I remember staring at that phrase, sitting alone in my small coastal apartment, a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. Overnight. As if my father hadn't spent decades building something in silence. As if the truth hadn't been carefully hidden, waiting for exactly the right moment to surface. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old acquaintances, former colleagues, even distant relatives suddenly remembering I existed. But one message stood out more than the rest. His name, Ryan. I let it ring longer than I should have, not because I didn't know why he was calling, but because I did. When I finally answered, there was no greeting, no confidence, no charm. Just silence. Then a voice I barely recognized. "What is this?" Short, tight, controlled, but barely. I leaned back slightly, letting the moment breathe. "What is what?" I asked. "A mistake." His tone snapped instantly. "Don't do that. I'm looking at an article right now saying you own Halcyon Group. Billions. Ava billions." There it was. Not my name, not how I was. Just numbers. I closed my eyes for a brief second. "Yes," I said quietly. The silence that followed felt heavier this time. Longer. Like something inside him was collapsing, piece by piece. "Why didn't you tell me?" That question, it almost made me laugh. Tell you what? That I had value? That I wasn't small? That I wasn't the version of me you decided I was allowed to see? "I didn't know," I answered calmly. Another pause. Then slower, quieter. "You're telling me this just appeared?" "No," I said. "It was always there." And that was the moment he understood. Not just the money, the mistake, the kind that doesn't come with a second chance. "I think we need to talk," he said. I turned slightly, looking out at the ocean again. Same waves, same rhythm, but everything had changed. "No," I said softly, "we really don't, because for the first time in a long time wasn't trying to be understood. I already was, and I thought that was the end of it." But some people don't know how to lose quietly. A few days later, the message came in. Not from Ryan this time, but from a law firm. Formal, cold, carefully worded. They wanted to discuss the financial disclosure tied to our divorce, which, translated into plain truth, meant one thing. He was trying to come back. Not for me. For the money. I remember sitting there, reading the email twice, then a third time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. I forwarded it to my attorney, then stepped out onto the balcony. The ocean was quieter that evening. Or maybe I was. People like Ryan don't just fight for assets. They fight for identity. For years, he believed he was the one who understood value, the one who knew how the world worked, the one who was ahead. Now that narrative was gone, and he was trying to rewrite it. The next morning, I got confirmation. There was no case. No loophole, no hidden angle he could exploit. The structure my father built wasn't just smart. It was final. Still, that didn't stop him from trying. Because losing money is one thing, but losing the version of yourself you believed in, that's something else entirely. A few days later, I met someone I never expected to hear from again. Lena. She looked different without the cameras, without the perfect lighting and curated confidence. Younger, quieter, real. "I didn't know," she said almost immediately. "I believe you," I replied. She hesitated, then told me everything. How Ryan talked about me, how he reduced my life into something small, manageable, insignificant. Not because it was true, but because it made him feel bigger. Then she showed me something else. Messages, plans. He wasn't just reacting, he was preparing, trying to build a case to claim something that was never his. I looked at the screen for a long moment, then handed the phone back. "Thank you," I said. She frowned slightly. "You're not angry?" I shook my head. "No. Because at some point, you stop needing justice to feel whole, and you start recognizing something far more powerful. The truth had already done the work for me. And once the truth settles in, life doesn't explode. It expands." 6 months later, everything looked different. Not in the way people imagine when they hear numbers like billions. There were no dramatic parties, no sudden transformation into someone unrecognizable. If anything, I became more myself than I had ever been. The company moved forward steadily, quietly, just the way my father intended. I spent my days learning, listening, asking questions I never thought I'd need to ask. And slowly, something shifted. It stopped feeling like an inheritance. It started feeling like a responsibility. One of the first decisions I made was simple, but it mattered to me more than any headline ever could. We launched a foundation focused on creative education, art programs, community spaces, opportunities for kids who just needed a place to be seen. Because long before any of this, That was my world. And I didn't want to lose it. One evening after a long meeting, I stood alone by the window overlooking the water. The city lights reflected softly across the surface, steady, calm. Daniel once told me something I didn't fully understand at the time. Your life didn't change when you gained everything, he said. It changed the moment you stopped losing yourself. I think I finally understood what he meant, because this was never about money. Money changes circumstances, not character. Ryan didn't become who he was when everything fell apart. He revealed who he had always been. And me, I didn't become stronger when the world found out what I had. I became stronger the moment I realized I was enough, even without it. Sometimes people walk away thinking they're leaving something ordinary behind. What they don't realize is that they were standing next to something extraordinary all along. And sometimes the greatest form of justice isn't proving them wrong. It's no longer needing them to be right. When I look back now, what surprises me most isn't the money or the headlines or even the way everything changed almost overnight. It's how clearly life revealed people once there was nothing left to hide behind. Because the truth is, none of this started with billions. It started with a quiet assumption that I was small, predictable, replaceable. And for a long time, I believed that version of myself too. Not because it was true, but because it was repeated often enough by someone I trusted. That's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes the greatest limitation in your life isn't your situation. It's the identity someone else convinced you to accept. And the moment that identity breaks, everything else follows. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. Like a door opening that you didn't even know was there. The money didn't create my value, it revealed it. It forced the world, and more importantly, me, to see what had always been there. So here's the lesson I want you to take with you. Don't wait for a moment of validation to believe in your own worth. Don't wait for success or recognition or someone else's approval to decide you matter. Because if your confidence is built on what others see, it will always disappear the moment they look away. But if it's built on what you know about yourself, it becomes something no one can take from you. In your life, right now, there may be people who underestimate you, who misunderstand you, who assume you are less simply because they haven't taken the time to see clearly. Let them. Not every truth needs to be explained. Not every value needs to be proven. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is quietly build a life that speaks for itself. Now, I want to ask you something simple. Have you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you and later realized they were wrong? If you feel comfortable, share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else feel less alone. And if this story meant something to you, take a moment to subscribe to Untold Journey Stories so we can keep bringing you more stories that remind you exactly who you are, even when the world forgets.